Darkest Dungeon, Maximum Car, Taekwondo, and Richard Simpson from We're Not Wizards. This is Staying In.
But it's very relaxed because you feel you're kind of like dropping into somebody else's conversation, the way you just get the click of the kettle. Yeah. And then it's just like, did I ever tell you about the time I was fighting 2 6-year-olds at Taekwondo?
You've heard our outtakes.
It's like Chris is here with us.
No, it is. No, I did fight 2 6-year-olds at Taekwondo.
Did you actually do that?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
How old were you at the time?
I mean, did you... Now, hold on a sec. I mean,
right.
We need to probe further into this.
Were you 6 at the time? Because that makes it a lot more sensible.
Was it?
No, it was last week.
Was it that you were doing the Taekwondo and they were not doing the Taekwondo, in which case this is a slightly more serious situation? Or is it that you were all doing the Taekwondo and it was a sort of...
Yeah, it was that. It's the second one. It's not the first one. It's not like I came out of Tesco's and I saw 2 kids like playing about on the machine, you know. What are you climbing all over that bus? Get off of it. The kids want to get in the Paw Patrol bus.
Were you in a Taekwondo class? Were you on the same level as the 6-year-olds?
I think that's it, pretty much. No, I think, yeah. Well, I've gone down this kind of, I think this year's my midlife crisis. Because I've done technical hobby, you know, so I've done the podcast, which is a technical hobby, so We're Not Wizards was born. I've started trying to play football with people ridiculously younger than my age. So I end up like almost dying halfway through the actual football match.
Are they 6-year-olds as well?
What's that? No.
Are they 6-year-olds as well?
No. 9. Okay. 9, possibly 10.
No,
possibly 10.
Good.
As long as you've hit double digits, that's fine.
Well, I think you can get away with it. And then last week I went and got my eyes tested, and it turns out I need reading glasses. Which is... Reading glasses? Yeah, I know, but reading glasses are weird because it puts you in this alternate universe where all of a sudden you can read. And all of a sudden, everything within 3 feet of you is crystal clear. I mean, it's like, you know, I think I put on... It's almost like buying a PlayStation Pro and having yourself 4HD or HDR or whatever. Everything's wonderful. And the trouble is, when you look up, everything beyond about 3 feet... It's completely blurry, so you can't see anything at all. So I'm trying to do work today, and I'm like looking at my computer, and my boss shouts up at me and says, "Oh, have you done this?" And I look up at him, and I just can't see him at all. He's just like a big blurry mess. So I got my reading glasses, which means I can kind of read and kind of see and kind of not. And then I forget every time I go out for a coffee that I can't see where I'm going now, and I keep tripping over stuff, which is rubbish. It's no good.
Is that how you got into the fight with the children then? So.
No, well, the fight with the children is, this is my next thing, which is I started Taekwondo classes because I'm over the age of 40, and I'm one of these, you sit down and you go, how much exercise do I actually do? Because usually when you go to the doctor says like, so how much exercise would you say you do on a weekly basis, and you fudge it. You know, they say, it's at least half an hour a day, and you say, well, I kind of walk down from my bed to get a cup of tea. That could potentially take half an hour, and I know I'm out of breath when I'm at the bottom of the stairs. So
if I'm out of breath, it's exercise.
That is definitely it. Well, my pulse is racing and stuff, and I sat down and I went, okay, I want to start some gentle exercise. I want to get myself a bit fit, look after myself, strengthen myself up. So rather than go walking or jogging, I decide to go into a full contact sport that involves kicking as high as you possibly can. So I'm starting to do this, and they do like exercises at the beginning. So my face is red, I'm sweating like a mess. And then the instructor says, okay, you're at the beginning, so what you have to learn is you got to learn how to take a kick. You got to learn how to take a punch.
Yeah.
Which you have to. But at the same time, he says, also, we've got young people here who also need to learn how to take a kick and take a punch.
Okay, can I just say, this classroom environment is getting more and more suspicious as the story goes on.
I've got a feeling that the instructor loves opening up a new class.
Yeah,
so I'm just like, imagine I'm standing there. And I'm standing there, and he's saying, so you got to learn how to take a kick and a punch, because that's the main thing about it. So first of all, in the first lesson, I get teamed up with a black belt. Yeah. He's doing the moves, totally doing the moves. And I'm, and it's one of these things, in Fight Club, how he says, you ever been in a fight before? How do you know, how do you really know yourself if you haven't been in a fight? And you see when you get hit and it hurts a bit, it's actually not as bad as you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
But this black belt was going for it, and then I said, okay, that's fine.
That's enough.
That's enough. Okay. He says, now what? He says, and then he presents me, and he goes, here, I want you to fight these two people. Now, I haven't looked properly, and I turn around, and there's two 6-year-olds there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, but you think maybe they're people who are like really, really short because you haven't got your reading glasses on.
I didn't know I needed them at the time. I think if I had my reading glasses on, I would have been in a lot of trouble.
So how did you get on against the mighty opponent?
Well, it's a contact sport, but you're also aware that the class is kind of like mixed. So you have got black belts all the way down to basically kids that are like 6 years old,
right,
that are just starting out, kind of starting to get their belts properly. So there's the parents in the room next door. So I'm conscious. I'm conscious,
all
right?
watching you.
This guy's looking out and seeing, all right, he's standing there next to little Johnny. This will be interesting. And I look round and I clock this parent, and the look is just one of, that's fine. I know you got to fight him, but if you even hurt him, and I'm like, okay. Stuff like that. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'll punch a little bit. And I'll pretend to kick a bit, but I won't do it too hard. Yeah. But then, my fundamental flaw in the whole thing was realising the height that 6-year-olds are. And when they kick you in the shins. And when they punch straight out in front of them, you can guess whereabouts they can hit.
Yeah.
But on the bright side, when you kick them in the head, so they only do it once.
It was like Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon, when he goes and kicks the boss, and he just flies across the room, and it was a model in the film. He just goes like, Rah!
Didn't you do martial arts at some point, Pete?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I was.
Didn't you get what did you? Didn't you get like green belt or something?
Yeah, I got just over halfway through the ranking, through the belt ranking, and got to the point where I was number 2 in the world at one point in my chosen martial art.
No, you weren't.
I mean, the thing is, it's a relatively small martial art. It's actually the Taekwondo and the martial art I used to do, which is called Tang Soo Dao. They're both offshoots of the same martial art. So martial arts have like different family trees, and so they're sort of cousins of one another. The two martial arts, but Taekwondo is massively popular. So me saying I was second in the world for my height and weight and age and whatever it was like, it wasn't. I mean, it was okay, but yeah, I did that, and I remember the exercises being utterly insane. Like, there's this one thing that we used to have called horse stance, which is where you have to you sort of stretch your legs out so that you have them sort of shoulder width apart, and then the idea is that you bend at the knees and you keep your back straight, and you bring your butt down to the back of your knees, the height of the back of your knees. And then basically, and you're like, oh, okay, that's quite painful after about 15-20 seconds. And to get to the belt that I was on in the end, I had to do, I think, 7 minutes straight. And at the end of it, like, basically your legs just lock. Your legs are like, well, I'm going away now. Like, I'm going to go over here and just forget that this is a thing. So I had to do that. And then basically the idea was, if you couldn't, in the belt ranking test, if you couldn't do it for however many minutes it was, you had to then run a lap, do 50 push-ups, and then do it all again from start. And it was like, cool. It was good fun.
I never realised, Pete, that you were the muscle of the group.
I was, yeah. No, I was really
Yeah.
good. I genuinely, before I went to university, there were basically 3 paths that I could go down. This is absolutely true, and anybody who's seen me in real life will think, well, it's probably good you didn't go down some of them. One of them was basically I can either go to university and study acting, like that was, well, go to university. That was the option. From
Hang on. Right, this is a brilliant choice because
Okay.
Richard doesn't know you, so
Okay.
give Richard your 3 options.
Yeah, I want to hear
Okay.
this. Yeah.
And he's gonna and see if Richard can guess which route you went down.
Okay. So
Okay.
there were 3 options that I could go down. I could go
Okay.
to university and study acting.
Right.
I could go into basically get a flight to Tibet and study with the monks for 3 years.
Jesus.
So that was one option that was on the table.
You're saying that
And-
seriously?
And then the other option was go and join the army as an officer. There were basically
Straight into officer class.
well, yeah, basically because I have a grammar school education. If you have a grammar school education, you go straight in as an officer. I mean, or at least that was what we were told when we were at grammar school. They were like, if you join the army, you'll go in as an you do basic training for X number of months, and then you become an officer. Yeah.
But you do. You sound. You're very, very kind of well spoken. So I can imagine you hanging around with a lot of other softly spoken, well spoken people.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So the army, or monks, or monks.
That's what I was going to say. It could be monks, couldn't it?
Yeah.
I look at you, Pete, and I do tend to think Tibetan monks.
Yeah.
That's what I think of.
I'm gonna. I don't know. I think. Is this for any money or is it for the star prize?
I
This
don't
is like the
think you
chase,
can put a
isn't
price on this, really.
It's like lie to me, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which one is it? I'm probably going to say that you went and probably did a bit of acting.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I think you did.
Yeah. So basically, the sort of branching pathway was essentially I could go and do acting, which was something I was really interested in, or I could go and do further studying of martial arts basically in somewhere where you can study it full time, which there's only very few places in the world where you can do it. And the job that I would do after that would then marry that up with the acting, or
International assassin.
well, yeah, international assassin, but yeah, like body double or stunt double or martial arts acting or something.
This is It's like I've never ever
Yeah.
not wanted to. Never before have I wanted to experience a parallel universe more than now. Never before have I realised that I'm in the boring universe.
Right,
And we got the boring Pete.
Yeah.
We could have had Pete Willington, international man of mystery. Your parents had such a different view of you to what my parents have me, because there was a good chance I wasn't going to get into uni, and I found out after I kind of got the marks that I needed that my mum and dad were already planning to kind of get me trained up to work as like a hotel concierge, and like work as become like hotel manager.
You trained up.
That's the future they saw for me.
What do you mean? Get you trained up? Waking you up in the morning
Well, no,
and
they
being
would-
like,
they would-
"Come on, Dan,
Dan.
do your sheets. Come on."
No, Dan.
Oh,
Are they basically? Were they basically asking you to like just do some laundry or like?
No, their
open
the career
doors.
that they had planned out for me would be me running a hotel.
What?
That was the idea that they had in their mind for me. That's like hotel management was a career that I would be good at, and there was money in, and I could do that.
Had you expressed an interest in hotel management?
No,
This is brilliant. What? Oh my god! What? I don't understand how of all the careers.
I don't understand.
I want you to run a
What's
Linton
weird
travel
is that I
tavern.
now actually work in hotels. Well, work with hotels. Good.
Yeah, absolutely fiery reg. Going full reg like I did in our pen and paper RPG that we played.
Oh
at the
my
weekend.
god!
Right. Okay. So.
Okay.
So I guess. Well, I guess Sam, if you want to set the backstory for what this is.
So, Pete, it was your birthday.
It was
a couple of weekends ago.
It was.
And,
Happy birthday. Belated
Thank you
birthday.
very much. Thank you.
And I said, everyone come to my house, because you don't want to be hosting on your birthday. You know, you don't want to be doing stuff and clearing up after people.
Yeah.
So I thought, come around to mine and we'll host. And I think as part of hosting duties now, we've kind of started to do a thing where, well, if you're hosting, you might as well write an RPG and put that on whilst people are around your house. Yeah. So we played Dread again, but I kind of changed it up a bit, because we played Dread we spoke about it a few shows ago, and Dan wrote this incredible story about us going on a journey on this sci-fi adventure, and basically from then on I got into my head that wouldn't it be brilliant if you could play a Dread game but have all the elements where you're pulling from the tower being a bit more contextual and being actually linked to a physical kind of movement. And when I said that I was going to write the next RPG, I got this idea in my head, and I thought, wouldn't it be brilliant when you're like lifting a case off a valuable watch, that at the same time you've got that image in your head, you're also pulling from a tower. So I got this idea of writing an RPG around a heist for Dread, because Dread uses a mechanic that you're essentially pulling from the tower to increase tension, as it's a horror game. But I kind of wanted to play on that a little bit, because that was the one flaw in not Dan's game, but I think in the entire Dread design, that you shy away from pulling from the tower because
you're scared, basically.
You're scared. The consequences are too great. Your character essentially dies or something catastrophic happens, and you kind of end up like stepping away from moments of great action or tension or whatever. So I wanted my version of Dread to be slightly different, so I essentially took away the pulling from the tower and had that as a totally separate mechanic, and then brought in lots of Dungeons and Dragons dice rolls. I made it quite simple for you. I hope I made it quite simple for you, Pete, Dan, and Chris. Gave you 4 abilities: strength, athletics.
It was strength,
and
dexterity, charisma, wisdom, and strength.
Yeah, and within those there was 4 traits. So, like within the traits of strength, it was like attacking, dodging, and something else. And all those things would require a dice roll to do rather than a pull from the tower. And that was kind of my way of trying to encourage you more to live within the story rather than worry about, right, if I do this, is he going to make me pull from the tower?
Yeah.
And so I basically sent you guys off on this heist journey set in the 80s. Before we played, I'd sent you each an envelope with a coded message inside, and you brought all that with you, and we had 80s music on in the background, and I think it went quite well. I mean, how did you guys take to it?
Oh, it went brilliantly.
Yeah, it went really well.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I think you mitigated the sort of the thing with the tower quite nicely. Actually, it felt like we wanted to take a few more risks. It definitely got around that.
Yeah.
No, it was really, really good. And I think the really cool thing about it was, obviously, within the core Dread rule set that Dan was playing on, it worked really, really well for that horror themed game.
Yeah.
And yours was much more heisty, and there was opportunities for us to be a bit funnier without breaking the...
Oh my god. It was...
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing that dice rolls can do.
Yeah.
Because the tower is quite a binary result.
Yeah.
You fail or you succeed. You either succeed in a very... It's basically... You're either rolling a nat 20 with that tower by succeeding, or you're rolling a 1 by failing. It's like a unqualified success, or it's an unqualified failure. Yeah. But with the dice rolls, what I've always felt with is there's a lot because there's a bit of a muddy sort of middle ground, there's a lot more potential for things to happen and for stories within that to develop.
Yeah.
So my idea when I was writing The Heist, as it was imaginatively called, was that for you actually not to pull from the tower until the final act, because I wanted to kind of get you into this comfortable position where you were, as players, you were a lot more engaged with the story. So when it came to pull from the tower, you were in a position where it not only reflected the story a lot more, but also you realised that there was a big, strong link to why you had to pull from the tower. Yeah. And my idea is that you were locked in this. You were basically locked in the jail cell in the third act, and every lock, and you were locked in the jail cell in the third act, and you'd uncovered this master key. But every time you wanted to use the master key, you had to pull from the tower. Yeah. So it's the idea of like turning the key slowly in the lock, and like the key like molds to the lock shape. And if you're able to pull from this Jenga tower and put the thing on top, the idea was that your dexterity in changing the lock was enough that the key was able to form and locks able to open. And then basically it was like, that's a mechanic. Now I'm going to put things in your way and tempt you.
Yeah.
And see. So you were escaping from these from this prison, basically, this police station, and your route between you and the exit was basically lots of tempting things that I was basically just like, what can I get these guys to do? So there was like an armory that was locked.
He went straight for the armory.
Why?
Yeah, so
isn't his hands deadly weapons?
You guys talk about it.
I thought your hands would just be deadly weapons. You wouldn't need.
Pete basically funneled his entire history of martial arts and violence into his character.
Yeah.
Was there shouting? Was there shouting and running and screaming?
There
Pete?
was a fair amount of there was some.
The air was considerably bluer at the end of the.
So Pete, you created this character called Reggie
Bates.
Reggie Bates. Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Reggie Bates.
And
did you put an accent on, Pete?
I didn't, but I mean, I put on a sort of slightly gruffer, like I'm not taking any, I'm not taking any poop from any of you, sort of thing.
I'm not taking.
It was just like we played this one scene where we were in a casino. And the guys had to find their way to get into the office where this safe was, where the item that they were trying to get in was stored. And like I'd spent ages like writing mechanics for each of the casino games that they could play. So if they sat down and played went on one of the like the fruit machines, so I had a dice mechanic so they'd be able to play it. Like if they played roulette, the same thing. Dan did play a little bit of blackjack, but I mean Pete just stormed in and basically knocked out a security guard, and
things were not progressing fast enough, so I was like, I'm gonna accelerate things.
It was literally like that, like the scene in Anchorman where you see they go, that escalated fast.
Yeah. Dan was there, just like, right, let's play this cool. I'll sit at the table, play a bit of blackjack. Turns his back on Reg for 1 second,
and
Pete's punched someone out.
Yeah, just sees like a red mist, basically. Yeah, I mean, so my character was, because the way I saw it was one of the mistakes I think we made, because we hadn't, or one of the mistakes I think people make generally when they're playing pen and paper RPGs, especially like short stories, is they put their points into like everything, and they sort of have one character that's not very good at anything but is all right at everything, and then they try and solve all of the puzzles and all of the situations by trying to outthink them, and sometimes it's just not possible to know what the DM actually wants you to do. So I was like, do you know what? For this game, I'm just going to go full strength. So I put all of my points into, being a badass in terms of strength, and writing my character in a way that was just like, yeah, he's a nightclub bouncer. He doesn't take any mess. Like, he's just, all of these things. And then playing to that character was a lot easier, because it was like, obviously he's going to kick off. Do you know what I mean? Like, obviously he's going to kick off, because that's just in his nature.
When we were playing it, as well as thinking what we had to do, we had to constantly be mitigating what you were doing.
Oh, brilliant. But Richard, the best bit was that we kind of reached this climax, and they had, like, the team had this nemesis that they were going for, and like they managed to escape from this prison cell, and like this nemesis, this inspector, who was working on the side of the baddies all along. He was at the end of this corridor, and they had to face off against him. And Pete proceeded to like roll a string of terrible dice rolls.
Yeah.
Whereas Chris, who was playing a 17-year-old boy who's based on the character Marty McFly, he went from... It was incredible. He was just rolling 20 after 20 and basically took this guy out.
Oh,
and Pete playing this massive burly bouncer, which is like just couldn't do anything. And the best moment of the whole thing was once Pete had broken into the armory, and like Pete tooled himself up with a shotgun, with an assault rifle, and had like a full bandolier of ammo.
It's just like Commando or something like that.
Yeah,
full on,
and he was just like, I'm gonna Rambo this shit. Like, and Chris's character Marty also picked up an assault rifle, and so Reg goes storming into this like main police area. Like, I gave them opportunities to get out covertly at this point. Can't just make that clear.
Yes,
but you
Reg
also Pete was on the team. There was no covertness going on.
Pete went full out, and so he stormed into this room, and I made him make an intimidation check, and. Even with the boon that he got, he rolled about 4 or 6.
Yeah.
So it was very easy for me, just like, yeah, they're not intimidated. They just start like walking towards you. And then Chris goes, right, I roll an intimidation check, rolls a 20.
Oh, fantastic.
And it's just like, yeah, they all put their hands up, and they're like scared of this 17-year-old kid. And like Reg's arc from like the first thing Reg did in the whole game was throw someone out of a pub. And then, like, really intimidating and, like, full on. And then he just went to this really, like, unintimidating pussycat of a character. It was brilliant.
The amount of times in that game that my character just kind of rolled his eyes and sighed at what Reggie was doing. It's like, oh, for God's sake, not again.
Yeah.
Did it take a long time to write it, Sam?
I think we had about a month between playing Dan's game to playing...
I think so. About a month and a half.
Yeah.
About a month and a half. So, and I think that whilst I wasn't spending every night writing it, it was at the back of my mind constantly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as I said, like, for me, it was all about that initial image of, and that initial thought of wanting to make the pulls from the Jenga tower feel like they're part of the world rather than like a conceptual thing, which they are in, the actual rote page of Dread.
Yeah.
So I had the idea of the heist in my mind, and then a piece of advice that Dan gave me was kind of like think the scene and then work backwards. And because one of the great things that Dread does is works to a 3-act structure, so I was kind of like, right, so the first act is the setup, the second act will be the heist, and the third act will be the escape from the situation. So once I'd sort of got the mechanics in place, and this is what I'm going to use dice rolls for, and this is what I'm going to use pulls from the tower for, the rest of it came into place. And I think that I definitely overwrote and overthought the first act,
right?
But then the second and third, I'd kind of developed a way of writing that a way of writing bullet points that wasn't too prescriptive. Because in the first act, it was kind of like, well, if the players do A, then Y happens. If the players do B, then X happens. If the players do C, and try to think of every single eventuality.
Yeah.
And that was kind of made me feel comfortable. But as soon as we started, like all three of them went off piste. Like that, like they didn't go in. They didn't pick any of the directions that I thought they were going to do. Like, and Dan warned me that this would happen, and I didn't. And whereas I believed you, Dan, like I still didn't understand the full extent of what that kind of meant.
So it's like you were like playing a choose your own adventure book that you had written, and they decided to pick up a copy of Harry Potter instead, or something like that.
Yeah.
We brought our own pages.
One of the things that I did was that the initial idea was they'd all been sent this envelope with a code in it, written in Playfair cipher.
Yeah.
And the code was a clue to which drink they should pick when they got to the bar. And on picking the right drink and sitting down with the guy who was setting up the heist that was his way of the character testing them to go, yeah, you're the right person for the job. You've been able to decipher this code and you've picked the right drink from this bar. So let's go on.
Yeah.
Pete and Chris didn't decipher the codes. Dan had deciphered it, but decided that his character wouldn't actually pick the drink.
So can I admit something? Now I may have told fibs when we were playing the game and tried to blame it on my character. I just didn't realise I had to pick an ale.
Well, again, that's. But the thing is, I didn't factor in for that. So, and that's bad game design, isn't it? That's just with board games, with computer games, with everything. Like assuming that your players are at a certain level of knowledge as you're going in. That's just bad game design. 'Cause I assumed going in that Dan, Pete, and Chris would be at a set level of knowledge. They would have deciphered this. They would have picked the drinks, and then we go on.
Yeah.
But because I'd assumed that level of knowledge or that level of competency, I guess, like the whole first act had to become a lot more improvisational and off script than I'd planned, because Dan was just like, well, I know that was the right drink to pick, but I didn't want to pick it. What are you going to do now? I was like,
I then spent 20 minutes deciphering the other two codes that they hadn't bothered to decipher.
Did it make it more fun though, because you were having to improvise? Did you panic, or was it a bit more? Did it flow better? Or?
I think that at first I panicked, and I think that was part of I didn't know their characters enough and how they would behave, so I couldn't play to that in a way, which I think is something that comes from a bit more of a longer campaign. Like if you were doing D&D over months, and a massive campaign, I think as a DM you'd be able to go, right, I know how that character's going to react to this. Like I know how, if I put this in front of that character, I know how they're going to behave. But because it was essentially the first time I'd met you all.
Yeah, I think we're similar to that as well. I think it's the first time that in that situation we were the characters as well. So we're kind of putting the feelers out on what our character would do in these situations as well, and kind of testing things out. If I look back on it again, some of the decisions I made were probably token things that because I knew the character had this in his backstory. Oh, I'm going to play on that. When if you were playing it more naturally, then I wouldn't. It would have been a much more subtle thing, that kind of thing.
I think that comes from the. I think that's part of the limitations of Dread. I think if you knew that we were going into like a month-long campaign, I think we'd all be a lot more subtle and probably wouldn't be
throwing people out of pubs within the first 10 seconds.
Listen, that guy was really getting on my nerves.
He deserved it.
Yeah, of course he did.
Totally deserved it.
But as the game went on, and I was kind of like, right, those are those characters, and that was it. And then I think that the game moved on a lot more, and I kind of made a mistake with the first act. Like I designed it to be essentially a puzzle room, So with each of their piece of paper, I'd laid clues on it and different sort of numbers and orders about how to solve things in order to progress within the first act. And again, that was playing towards Pete, Dan and Chris rather than Reggie, Marty and Jimmy.
Yeah.
So I think that was a mistake, and once we moved on from that and I was playing with Jimmy, Reg and Marty, the characters rather than the players, then the game was able to... I felt like after that point, like the game just went and went and went, and we all had a lot more fun with it. And I genuinely think that you might enjoy this, because it's a game that I think has got very little fanfare. I mean, it was released in January of this year on PC and Steam, but it's only just come to the Vita and PS4 now. About a couple of weeks ago, it's called Darkest Dungeon.
Oh yes, I have heard about this. And
it managed to get a fair bit of fanfare when it came out on Steam, but the console release has been quite quiet.
Yeah, it just we were given a copy. I was given a copy by Red Hook Studios, and I kind of looked for it on the PlayStation Store after it was released, and you have to do a little bit of digging to find it.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a surprise, but I genuinely think, and Peter and Dan, you saw me playing a little bit of it whilst you're around at my house. It is one of the most interesting and unique like RPGs and dungeon crawlers that I've played in recent times.
Yeah.
And the main hook of the game, Richard, is that stress and like combat stress is a permanent thing. So unlike in like Tomb Raider or Far Cry 3, for example, where Lara experiences one instance of like combat stress and PTSD, but then gets over it. Again, ludonarrative dissonance.
You can't get it again. We've already done bingo.
In Darkest Dungeon, the effects of what you do and what you put your characters do sticks. Always. So,
Sam, are you doing this because I sent you a link the other day to a Star Wars dicey card game? Is this you getting me back? Have you been searching around for a game? Because I am basically like some kind of evil dice addict devil for Sam, where I keep tempting him with stuff all the time.
You are the devil sitting on his shoulder saying, "Go on, buy some."
Just another six-sider. But is this getting me back and saying, all right, well, I know what I'll get him, because I know he likes Dark Souls and I know he likes a little bit of RPG nonsense, and so now I'm going to hit him with Darkest Dungeon, which I have heard of, which you're about the second person that has said to me, you need to get this, because it is fantastic.
I think it is telling, like, just to kind of set it up, that you had this uncle or family member, and he was, the richest person in town, like, had this massive house on the hill, and basically he got bored with his decadence, so he started exploring, like, the dungeons beneath his estate, and uncovered lots of like eldritch horror kind of stuff and bad things and like occultist items, and like awakened lots of horrible nasty things, and like brought the house into ruin, and he dies, and you effectively, it's like you play his heir, and you are tasked with investigating the dungeons like after him. And so the game is kind of centers around you taking like 4 heroes on different journeys through the dungeon. So when you go into a dungeon, you have a specific task, whether it's investigate 90% of the rooms or like complete 100% of the room battles that you get in. and new characters and new people are arriving into the hamlet all the time. So you get this like constant like recycling of people like to take on quests, and by God, you need people, because not only are you like fighting lots of creatures, but you're also fighting the stress that these characters go under. And unlike in Tomb Raider and in like Far Cry 3 and lots of games really, where like the stress of battle is kind of like this forgotten thing, like, oh, that's a good narrative.
I've just gone through extreme body trauma. There's only one thing to do: go and mow down 150 guys.
Yeah.
But like Darkest Dungeon like flips that on its head. So if a enemy scores a critical hit on one of your guys, like your guy and several of the rest of the team will receive like stress damage. Like the stressful impact of what's happened to that character has a massive effect on the team. And if you let your players get too stressed, they'll end up working against you. So I played it, and one of my characters, you have like this sort of like stress indicator as well as health. So your health goes down and your stress goes up. So once your stress reaches a certain point, it's like almost like the point of no return, and they'll become like irrational, or they'll become paranoid. And once you get to that point, they'll start like just passing on your turn and just refusing to go because they're too stressed out. Or they will just act like they will just go headlong into a situation, or they will start bringing the rest of the team down and start influencing the other team and trying to send them as mad as they've gone. Like they'll go like, oh, this situation just dire, like there's no hope for us, like we just should turn back. And you see like all the other characters in your team starting to get just as stressed as your other character, and you're just like, oh, what do you do? Like some of the situations that you find yourself in because of that are just so unique and beautiful. And like to try and increase the stakes a bit, I started naming all my characters. So I've got a Chris, I've got a Peter, I've got a Dan, I've got a Sam, and
Dan's doing very well, I hear.
Dan is doing really well. Dan contracted syphilis.
Great.
And Dan also Dan got really stressed.
I'm doing pretty well in the game as well.
Yeah. Dan got really stressed in one dungeon crawl that I did. And so basically once you survive a dungeon, you can either like go through and complete all the objectives for a dungeon, or you can retreat, but retreating causes your characters to get even more stressed out by the situation, like the failure of the feat, and that has effect on them. But you can alleviate the symptoms of stress by, you can take them to the church and they can meditate, or they can be flagellated. Is that the word?
Yep.
Flagellation. Or you can take them to the pub, and they can gamble, or they can drink, and all those kind of things like help relieve their stress. Or you can take them to a brothel.
Great.
Dan is refused entry to the brothel because he has certain predilections that are not met.
I have very particular tastes.
So, so he has reached a level of notoriety within the town that if I was to alleviate some of his stress, like I have to find another way of doing it that suits him. So Darkest Dungeon is kind of like I'm not a big fan of micromanagement games, but because Darkest Dungeon has this wonderful personality about it, like I actually don't mind it, because I feel like the world that's created around it is so well fleshed out and idealized, and to top it all off, like your whole adventure and your life within this game is being narrated. I don't know if you've played Bastion, Richard.
I've played a little bit of it.
So you know the narrator in Bastion, like if you were to kill someone, like they come over the top of your game and it's just like, oh, slain in style. Like it just pulls you into that world. Like the whole of Darkest Dungeon is narrated by this wonderful like baritone, like gruff, like overlord of a narrator, and just like brings this whole like decorum and theatricality to the proceedings, and it's absolutely wonderful. And I don't know what Dan or Pete you thought of the game when I was playing it, like just watching it over my shoulder.
Yeah, no, it looks really, really fascinating. The art style is really lovely.
Yeah,
like that, it's almost like inky, gothic. It's like
it's a very sort of simple, you know. It's a turn-based combat on a sort of 2D playing field, but the amount of life and depth they bring into the art really like brings it out. I think
it very much feels like a management game, a relatively dry management game that's made not dry by the fact that it's got an amazing. I mean, clearly the gameplay is really good, but it's also got, you know, a really cool sort of hook to all of it. This psychological element. And the beasts are pretty gross too, right? Like they're really well designed and really thought provoking, and it's got that like Lovecraftian Cthulhu-esque horror rather than like it's a ghost. It's more like here's a terrible beast that
tormented
you sort of
soul.
look at and go, oh god, yeah, tormented soul, and like some like half like Lovecraft liked quite a lot of like beasts that were like two things melded together. Like there's a lot. It feels like there's a bit of that. Yeah, it looked really, really interesting.
I have watched a Twitch stream of this because my friend Jeremy Greer, who is the worst, and I'm going to say this on any podcast that I'm on, Twitch streamed some of this, and I sat there and he continually was saying, "You have to get this. You have to get this because it's £18." And I was like, "No, I can't because I'm not buying any more games." He says, No, it's not this. It's not a game. It's a micromanagement horror. It's stressed out of his. It's stress beyond stress. You're going to hate it. He says, think of it as kind of like a little bit of self-hatred just for yourself. And I was like, no. So he's been on at me, and now I come on this, and I get Sam on at me as well.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
I just, you know, I don't know what to say. I really don't.
The game doesn't like you, and I think that's part of its detriment.
Well, like, it has to join the list, because not many people like me.
like Dark Souls, like you have to come to terms with the fact that the game is not on your side, and the game doesn't want you to succeed. And I think sometimes you can feel a bit like cheated out of battles and cheated out of situations. Like you'll just be walking along a corridor and suddenly all your characters will just like get really stressed out for some reason. Like obviously because they're in this massive like dungeon and they're being attacked by all these like horrors. But still, that can be enough just to tip like all your players over the edge. And I think that that's a bit to his detriment. And also, I think that the game is at home on the PC, and I've been playing this on the PS4, and it is a little bit fiddly. Like I've seen people play it on PC, and I think that like navigating menus, and because you are having to manage quite a lot of stuff, that some of that navigation's obviously easy to do with a mouse.
I'd be really, really interested to play the Vita version.
Yeah, so would I. I think that on Vita, if this has a lot of touchscreen integration, I think this could work really well because the battles that you do are quite short. Like you can probably be in a dungeon for like 20 minutes, half an hour, like kind of your average commute. And I think that like that sort of play style and that sort of management really plays well. And
it doesn't need online though, does it? So it doesn't need online, so you can stop this. I'm starting to feel stressed.
Well. Let me tell you about something that you can download and play on the train and the bus and something like that. But you can download it for free.
Oh, that's
good.
Is
that okay? Is that all right? It's a cash thing. Yeah, I know. So I've been playing a really lovely game called Maximum Car.
That was kind of like when you're naming a game. That's kind of like the first. That was the first name on the list, wasn't it?
Yeah. That was the. Oh, we can't call it this, and then somebody just goes, yeah. Let's just do it. Let's just go ahead with it. This is it's from I Fight Bears, and their previous game was a game called Fist of Awesome, and Fist. So very good at naming games, obviously. Fist of Awesome was a 2D side-scroller in the vein of Streets of Rage, except for you were kind of like a woodchuck, and you had to go and fight bears, the alien bears that had invaded the world and taken over, and then you had to go and beat them all up and stuff. So naturally I was like, brilliant, I'm all about this. And Maximum Car, I take it you guys have played like Outrun and Burnout?
Yeah.
Burnout,
Yeah, okay. So, I loved Burnout 3, and I love Outrun. I tried to play Outrun, actually, on the way to Sam's, but my PSP broke. I was absolutely gutted. So I was playing Maximum Car instead, and it feels a lot like those two games. Outrun in terms of its... not necessarily its visual style, but the tone it's going for, right? So Outrun was always about more than just, it's an arcade racer. Outrun was always like, actually, it's a style. It's like a way of thinking about driving. Like Yu Suzuki was always about, I want you to feel the luxury and excitement and speed of driving a Ferrari when you play Outrun in the arcades, and that transitioned into all of the Outrun games. That was kind of a big thing about it. So it's got like a style all of its own, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then in terms of visuals, it looks like, I guess some people are going to like refer to it as like Minecraft, but it's really just voxels. So it's like quite blocky and so on.
Yeah, I've seen it. I can see it now. Yeah. It's kind of
like, lovely, right?
Yeah, it does look lovely. It's also got one of the best reviews ever.
What's the best review?
It says best game since Club Penguin.
Well, there you go.
Brilliant.
Like, I mean, if it's better than Club Penguin, like, come on. So in terms of like gameplay, it's basically Burnout 3. It's what Burnout would have been if it was condensed down into a mobile game, which is it strips away all of the periphery of like, it's not, you've got set races. There's an endless mode as well, and it's an arcade racer where you can boost and you can drive into oncoming traffic or try and avoid oncoming traffic for extra points and for bonuses and for score and stuff like that. So very much like Burnout. And you can take out cars, and you get a slow-mo flip of the car that you take out. It looks really, really awesome. But it's like super over the top, both in terms of its drifting, which you put the back end out all the time, basically. But also in terms of like sometimes you're driving around like this cool island-style blocky area. And then sometimes you'll be driving around this like candy land. It's like pink, and the dust from your back wheels look like rainbows. It's really, really cool in that way. And yeah, basically, as I say, it feels like I Fight Bears kind of boiled down Burnout 3 to its core fundamentals, and then made it a free to play mobile racing game. And it's really, really cool, really fun.
See, the thing is, like, with all the remakes that we're getting and all, like, especially on consoles and things like that, why all these, like, Burnout stuff is getting shoved to mobile and no one's, like, making, like, Burnout for, like, a rehash of Burnout for console, yeah.
But here's the thing, so if you go into it expecting this is going to be a Burnout experience, I think you'll come away like feeling like it's a lighter experience than you were expecting, because it is very much okay, go race, okay, do the thing, okay, now you're done, okay, go away and do real life for a little bit. Like it's not meant to be that Burnout 3 of okay, you're doing a race and now you've done that and now you're going to go and do crash mode and now you're going to go and do this other thing. Or it's not like Burnout Paradise where it's like okay, now you're going to go and find these things in the world and jump through. Like it's very much like straightforward. It's much more the aiming towards the okay, you've got 4 minutes, we're going to entertain you as much as we possibly can in those 4 minutes. And it feels really alive on mobile because of that, because it's not trying to be a really big, half-hour play session kind of a racing game. I do agree with you. Like, it'd be great to get some of the Burnout games HDified, and with EA recently saying that they are actually up for doing HD remakes now, whereas previously they were like, nah. It's like maybe we'll see Burnout and Skate and stuff like that in the near future.
I mean, do you, on that point, kind of, Sam, do you think that kind of... I was just trying to think about what racing games are coming out now. And the only big racing games I can think of that have come out have been the likes of Forza and Gran Turismo. The likes of Need for Speed, although they might have released an iteration, that's kind of fallen into the background. We haven't had a Burnout for a while.
Forza Horizons...
I know. I mean, the Forza games. I mean, as we've kind of discussed,
they're not Sims. They're not. I mean,
no. The Forza standard are though. The Forza games.
Yeah, they definitely are. Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. But the Forza series, as well as like kind of the Gran Turismo series, they're kind of predominantly kind of leading the way with racing games. Need for Speed have really fallen into the background now. I think with their racing games. As we said, we haven't had Burnout for a while. Is there a reason, do you think, that racing games aren't being made as much? We've got Forza, and as I said to you before, Forza Horizon is the first game that I've looked at and thought, I want to buy an Xbox One now because it looks that good. And I'm not even a huge fan of racing games, but that just looks amazing. I do just when Sam mentioned that, I thought I can't think of any other big racing games that have come out really.
I played racing games wise. I really enjoyed Dirt Rally, which was good, but was not real kind of racing.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Last game,
I mean, there's a lot of Sims like Project Cars and all that sort of stuff.
Project
Cars.
Cars.
You had Trackmania Turbo, but that wasn't massive.
No, God no, it didn't do. As far as I know, it didn't do brilliantly, which is a shame because that was a great game.
What was the last? I try to remember the last game I played on the PlayStation 3, which I really loved, which was the kind of the Burnout clone. Was it Need? It wasn't Need. Was it Need for Speed?
Hot Pursuit.
Was it Hot Pursuit?
Yeah, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit was the one that was. It was made by the Burnout team.
Yeah,
and they saw it as sort of like a spiritual successor to Burnout 3.
It was
and Revenge and stuff.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, it was great.
But how long ago was that? That was a good
5, 6, 7 years.
Exactly. So that's a long time in gaming terms.
Yeah.
You got to follow the money, surely. And I think that the studios associated with these games have been kind of what was it DICE or Black Box?
Black Box did. I want to say they did one of the Need for Speeds.
So hang on, let's do a little bit of research.
A little bit of research here. So the Most Wanted team, Need for Speed Most Wanted, was Criterion. Need for Speed Hot Pursuit might have been Black Box actually, and
Need for Speed Rivals is Criterion.
Rivals is Criterion as well. Yeah, and you can tell actually because it feels like Burnout Paradise.
Need for Speed Most Wanted.
Not quite as exciting, or is it?
I really like Most Wanted. I spent a lot of time on Most Wanted.
I thought Most Wanted was good.
Yeah.
So Black Box were another one of those companies bought by EA and kind of left to make some stuff. So the last one they made Skate. They made the Skate games. And then they made Need for Speed The Run, which was released 5 years ago, and since then they haven't done anything. So I think that it's one of those games
I think they got shuttered, actually.
Yeah, like they have got, or they are going to get shuttered. Like EA have got a massive history of doing this, which is why I'm worried about Visceral Games. It's just another studio that they've bought and that they're just going to let to die. I think that's probably part of the problem, that you've got these studios like Criterion and Black Box and DICE who are all trying to do interesting things with racing games. Like that moment in Burnout Paradise where with a PlayStation camera you take a photo to like burn the person that you're
brilliant.
That you're racing with. Like, absolutely fantastic. But that's not going to make EA any money now, is it? Like, or another big publisher. I just think that we're maybe heading into a portion where Like what was the game? Was it Disney who were making a racing game that got cancelled?
Yeah, Disney had a studio called Black Rock, and they were making, and they made a game that came out at the same time as another game. Basically, two racing games that were quite similar came out at the same time. One of them was called Split Second, and it did really, really mediocre. And that was when that was owned by Disney. I want to say, I think, yeah. Then there was another company making a very similar game at the same time, I think called Blur.
That's it, yeah.
And again, that was big, over the top, really good. Both games were really, really good. Don't get me wrong, they were really good. But
Blur was really good. I played Blur for a bit. That was fantastic. We've not mentioned Drive Club.
Yeah, true. But again, you look at Drive Club, and Evolution Studios now is going away because Drive Club didn't do very well.
Same with the crew,
which is a bit of a travesty because once it got over its initial hurdle, and it was actually working, it was a fantastic driving game. But then it was down to, did they almost all give overvalue in terms of the DLC? Because I remember deleting Drive Club off to get some more space. I remember putting it back on again because a couple of my mates were like, "Oh, let's play Drive Club," and I was like, "Okay, let me download it," and then having to sit and go through and kind of download about 50 different packs because they seem to just be releasing stuff all the time, and it was fantastic. But I'm not surprised it didn't make any money because they seem to charge you for the season pass, and because they felt so guilty about the debacle that was surrounding it, the online stuff. I think because was it not meant to be the first PlayStation Plus for PS4
this was their big.
This was it, wasn't it?
You were going to get it for free. You were going to get the PS Plus version of the game, and the whole thing was just a bit of a mess, really, which is a real shame because it is a good game.
Oh, I really liked it.
It felt really, really good, and, really enjoyable to play. I don't know. I think that
if you look at it right, let's have a look at those three studios. So BlackRock Studios, they make Split Second and Pure, which is another sort of a quad biking racing game. But Split Second, I definitely remember around the time. I mean, it was 6 years ago, releasing this game, which was you could put obstacles in front of races and all this kind of a really sort of showboating racing game, and that's it. I mean, I am looking on Wikipedia, but that's the last game they made, bought by Disney. Shut down. Look at Criterion. That Criterion is a classic Electronic Arts thing. So let's get this team who make Burnout, who made Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, who made Most Wanted, who made Need for Speed Rivals. Great team. Right, now you're working on Battlefield Hardline.
Yeah.
Now you're working on Star Wars Battlefront. Same with Visceral. So Visceral make Dead Space 1 and 2. EA buys them. And now they're making one of the Battlefield games. Yeah, Battlefield Hardline, and now they're working on a Star Wars game, apparently.
But that's classic AAA studio development, though.
Well, look what happened to the developer of Mirror's Edge. It was kind of...
DICE?
Yeah, DICE. So EA buy them, promise of making Mirror's Edge 2, but not after you've done this.
Put some time into making us a nice Star Wars game that's going to make all the money first, please.
Yeah.
But big AAA studios do this. This is how they run businesses. Ubisoft is the classic example whereby when they get into the final, someone told me it was the final 3 to 6 months of the latest Assassin's Creed game. There's 1,200 people minimum working on the project at any one time across 6 different time zones. And it's just the way that those big companies work, because you've got to create so many assets and so many things in such a short amount of time that you've just got to get them done. Activision did it with Neversoft back in the day. They were like, "Oh, that Tony Hawk's game that you made for us was really good. Why don't we just buy you? Cool. Now you're making Guitar Hero." All of that stuff. And some companies have found really great success doing those sorts of things. Criterion was making Burnout and some middleware stuff, and then going on to doing really, really cool things with EA licenses. I think those games are really, really neat. But yeah, you're right. There is always that danger of overstretching a studio or putting a studio into something that it's not really comfortable making.
Well, they're just there to create assets. Here you go, guys. We know you've got 50 staff that are really good at doing this, and we know we can get more work out of them because they're used to doing so much more. So tell you what, we'll ship you into this team, and we know that you can create so much more then, or you can push people to do it.
But ultimately, like, in some ways I can completely understand it, because if you've got a bank of 20 3D artists who are sitting around doing something that's, maybe they've got 3 or 4 months before they need to spool up on the actual project that they're meant to be working on. You've got let's say you got 20 3D artists in another studio that's in another part of the world, and you say, right, okay, actually what we want you to do is we want you to make a bunch of cars. Here's the design doc, here's the visual doc, here's how everything needs to look. Doesn't really matter where you are in the world, you just need to figure out how long they're going to take and then do them. Like, in some ways, as having the job that I have, in some ways it's absolutely fascinating, and I can completely understand why they would do it, because 20 3D artists at AAA salaries is a lot to be having sat around not doing anything. That's a big expenditure. And it is fascinating from a production side of view, because it's like, well, how do you coordinate with somebody who's halfway around the world, like a team that you've never spoken with or met ever? Like, how do you coordinate and make sure that you're all making the similar looking art assets and stuff? But yeah, like, at the same time, it's also like, well, purity of the experience, purity of the vision, all that sort of stuff. And it's how you end up with games that look, with assets that look slightly wrong, or games that are slightly ajar with one another. Like, I don't know how boring this is, but like, from a production point of view, like Deus Ex Human Revolution, the boss fights in that were made by a studio that wasn't actually making the main game. They were outsourced to just do the boss fights.
Oh, I cared about this, yeah.
So the main studio was making the core game, and the core game everyone seems to really like. And I think it's fine. Like, but the boss fights were universally panned because they just weren't really part of the main game itself. And that's where you've got two different studios not really talking to one another, understanding what the overall objective of the product actually is.
Yeah.
And you can see that to a much lesser degree, but it's still there when you've got one studio working in, San Francisco and one studio working in London, and they're not quite 100% sure what all of the visual assets should look like.
But is it also not the case that you now get the money men more involved, who walk in and say, this game did really, really well. It had pink and purple squid that you could attack people with, and we need pink and purple squid. It's like, but we're doing a game in a desert. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
Put them in bubbles or something.
This is films feeding into like games, media and culture. This, the bleed in from one feeds into another. Like, and do any of us like have any worries that suddenly we'll get like a homogenized and very like sort of bland like board game industry because of this, or can like board games largely maintain, because they're very sort of singularly focused, like it's one person's creation, it's not, there's not like a studio behind it as such. Like, do you think like they're able to avoid this kind of malaise with like generating a game? Yeah,
and I'll tell you why. Because with a board game, its ideas seem to be more open than the games kind of industry, than I would even say the movie industry. I mean, we were talking about, when me and Sam last spoke, we were talking about temp worker assassins, which is a board game, which is a card game about you playing as a ninja who doesn't have any weapons, who have to go up against office workers who are bosses, using various stationery in order to kill those bosses. Now, you put that into any other genre, you put that into any other medium, a video game, you imagine you pitched that to a game producer, they would say, okay, but how close can we get it to a first-person shooter? How close can we get it to this kind of game? How close can we get it to that? Whereas, you know...
But surely the audience are the same, though.
Well, here's okay. So I think there's 2 points to this, right? So the first one is, I think there still is a whole bunch of different creativity and so on. Like, I do think that creativity is still really, really high. Okay, so like, yeah, you know, it's very easy to say in video games, like just as it is in board games, and it might not be the absolutely massive AAA scale, like huge productions and stuff.
Well, but like Darkest Dungeon, for example, like that's someone's idea. That's someone's seen a problem with games design and gone, right? Yeah, I'll fix this.
And like so the, you know, there are those kinds of games, but there's also games like Viscera Cleanup Detail, right? Which is a game about it's a first person, it's a quote unquote first person shooter, but the idea is basically that you're coming into a first person game and cleaning up after everybody's left. Yeah. So you're cleaning up all of the blood and putting all the health packs back and doing all that sort of stuff. You know, all of those things. And that's really, really weird and out there and different, and the indie space is definitely where a lot of that's happening, and indie studios are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're still being allowed to do those things. You know, Goat Simulator, for example, is another really good example. On the flip side of that, the reason why AAA in games isn't as experimental, let's say, as board games, is that, you know, if you spent $1 million making a board game, that's a very big production. I can't imagine. I have no idea, but I can't imagine the production of Pandemic Legacy cost more than $1 million, right?
No.
Whereas if you spend $1 million on a video game, I mean,
Shenmue 3.
I mean,
hey now.
I mean, let's face it. That ain't getting much for £1 million, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like $1 million, like $1 million is, I don't know, like a studio of 30 for a year.
Yeah.
So what we're saying then is that bringing it back to like Dan's original point, is it the fact that like racing games and the car games that we want just cost too much to make? So they're too much for an indie studio to take on and design, and it's too much for a big AAA studio to take a risk on.
Well, isn't there an expectation of how the game's going to look? I mean, I looked at videos of Forza Horizon, and that is spectacular. If you gave that to a smaller studio, they're no way they're going to have the assets to be able to create something like that.
And you think of like,
but that's why
the physics of that world.
But that's why with indie studios and arcade racers, they're actually, you've seen recently with things like Redout, for example.
Yeah.
You see that the futuristic racer is where they go, because if you focus on futuristic races, for example, or cartoon races, or something that's just not ultra realism, well, how does an anti-gravity vehicle drive? You don't know. Like, no one knows. So you can get away with stuff like that. You can get away with ultra minimalist graphics because why not? Like, it's the far future. But if you were trying to do a racing simulation, or if you were trying to do a big, you know, bombastic, explosive, arcade racer of the mid to late 90s and early noughties and stuff, then again, you probably want stuff to look really, really amazing, and that's just not going to happen. And actually, to come back to the thing that started this conversation off about 20 minutes ago, Maximum Car,
which I've downloaded.
That game,
can I just say?
Nice, excellent, good. I think one of the reasons that they've gone with voxels is that the game looks really cool in motion, like really smooth and explosive, and lots of cars on the track and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's not ultra HD. You know, it doesn't look like real racing. It doesn't look like a Gran Turismo or anything like that. So it can get away with being more bombastic and explosive and detailed without actually being more expensive to produce in terms of visuals, and therefore you could take a bigger risk on it. You can make a free to play indie game that's which in itself is a big risk.
Yeah, which I think with the board game side of things, I think that's why it's very, very, unless you're making miniatures, which when I spoke to
Yeah.
Mantic, and they said it's like 10 grand to make the tooling stuff to make a resin miniature or a plastic miniature. Whereas if you're printing off a card game, you can probably do a card game for about 5 grand. And then you just stick your stuff on Kickstarter, and then you're good, which means you can put any idea up there.
I mean, not even 5 grand. Like, I mean, printing costs for a run of, however many. Like, you can get a run of 1,000 for, maybe a couple of grand.
Yeah, well,
like,
I'm kind of asking. I'm kind of saying that to the guy that's done it, haven't I? Because you've done. But it's the presidential election of the presidential election.
Yeah, that's what we're calling it.
the title.
The weird thing is our title's not that much snappier. But yeah, I mean, when we were making Elections of US America Election, the card game, we've been doing, they're not cheap to make. They're not anybody can do it. But at the same time, they're a much lower risk than doing something else. And that's why that's why you can do a game with a dumb title like that. That's why you can do a game that's a little bit controversial in terms of American politics. And it's why that when you go to Kickstarter and ask for however much it is that we ask for, as long as you meet those goals, you're in the very least making a small profit out of it, and then anything on top of that is just golden.
Yeah. Which is why the entry level is so much smaller, so you were able to make that a reality. Yeah. So somebody who's sitting here and saying, I'll tell you what, I'm going to make my card game is going to be about putting away my clothes after I've ironed them. And, with dice.
Do it.
But you could make that. You could get it tooled up. You could get the dice done. You run a good campaign. You're asking people for, say, 5k, and there will be people that will do it for 5k. If you turn that maybe into a video game, I don't know.
Right. So I had to call up my TV, internet, and phone provider. I won't say which one for reasons that will become clear.
Yeah,
and we were just chatting about stuff, going over my account.
Just chatting, hanging out.
Chatting,
how are
just
you?
hanging out, just like, hiya, how you doing? The guy finished the call, and he's just like, as you know, Mr. Turner, when we started this call, we had to ask you lots of details about who you were and where you live and what your certain details are. I was like, go on. Is this the part where he goes, those are things you shouldn't have revealed? But luckily enough. And then he went, I'm just going to introduce you now to a new system we got. And it's called, what was it they called it? Something really douchey and corporate, like voice reco security.
Okay.
And I'll pass you through to the automated thing. Just follow a few systems and you'll be introduced to our new security software. And I was like, okay. And the phone literally went boop, 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 and this automated voice came on. And we're just like, from now on, your enter IP provider here, ISP provider here, will use your voice as your security feature for your account. Please repeat this phrase after the tone, and we'll use this for your security on your account. So now I don't have to remember anything about where I live. I just have to repeat a phrase, and apparently the system will just recognise who I am, which, as a guy who's been making podcasts for 10 years or so, makes me very worried about someone splicing together. So I went into full radio mode, and so they give you this phrase to say, which I'm not going to say, just in case someone really wants to
let me into my account.
Starts putting Sky Sports onto my account or something like that.
It's broadband with Sam Turner.
Well, that's what I did. I was just like, this is my broadband. My name's Sam. Something like that. And did it proper pro, oh yes, it's midnight radio. Here are the Smiths. And I immediately regretted it. But because I had to do it about 3 times. So they really got the essence of my voice, I guess.
You're surfing the internet late at night.
Yeah, exactly. That was it. And then I after the second time, I was like, I shouldn't have. Because whenever do you ring up your ISP provider in a good mood
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
you are pissed off at them for something. So every time I ring them up now, I'm going like, oh, they've charged me for this. Or like, oh yes, I really want to speak to you. That'll be great.
Let me in to my fucking account.
Like, I should have just like done it, just been like, yes, this is me. Please, I want to speak to someone.
Yeah. I want to make somebody who's working in a call centre very upset. I would like to talk to a graduate from a university who had bigger dreams, please.
I want to speak to the man who thought this was a safe security procedure.
I'd like to say to somebody, listen, I know it's not your fault.
I just, part of me just wants to ring up again now to see if this actually works. Like,
Yeah.
Like, welcome, Sean Thompson. What?
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
my
you let
word,
into someone
yeah,
else's
what?
account.
Oh my word. So are you basically now saying that Rory Bremner controls the world's wealth?
Oh dear.
So that was Staying In with Sam Turner, Daniel Frost, special guest Richard Simpson, and me, Peter Willington. Massive thank you to Richard from We're Not Wizards for joining us on this episode. We really do think you'll love hearing him talk about games on We're Not Wizards, so head on over to we'renotwizards.com for plenty more insightful chat about all things board games. And do say hello to them on Twitter via @we'renotwizards. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to us on iTunes, Mixcloud, Acast, Spreaker, Stitcher, Google Play. We're everywhere, basically. So wherever you prefer to get your podcasts, hit that subscribe button. And if you'd like to leave us a review too, then we'd be really grateful. We do read every single one, and it really does make our day when we get a new one. Visit stayingin.podbean.com for more information and links to the comics, games, movies, and more covered in this episode. And come find us on Twitter on @stayinginpod. Thanks for listening.